session. I don't think Joel will mind me calling him a nerd. In our profession, that's actually a compliment. So Joel Walco was going to start us off, and I'm going to use your Ingenious system from yesterday for writing figures. Yes.
Thank you very much. So it's a real pleasure to be here talking about this topic. It's joint work with the colleague Luis Aguiar, who's at the European Commission. Okay, yeah, just a quick word from my own sponsor. I have a book on the work I've been doing the past decade or so on how digitization has changed mostly music, but also books, movies, television, and so forth. And by the way, it comes out in November and makes a great holiday gift. Okay. Back to the point. So digitization has just led to a huge amount of new music being created. Last year, I was astounded to learn that almost 1 million songs were ingested into Spotify. They weren't all new, because some of them were remakes of old songs, but again, that's just an enormous number. And that creates a very big problem of product discovery for consumers. Now, in the old days, this was really solved in music by radio. When I say solved, it wasn't really solved. It was solved for a small number of artists and songs with radio exposure. Now there are a lot of solutions. There's social media, there's personalized playlists, but what this paper is going to be about is what I would call one-to-many playlists. Playlists that are the same for everyone, not like Discover Weekly, but more like others. And so what are playlists? Well, they really are two separate things. And I'm thinking about Spotify again. One is they're potentially informative lists of songs. You see a list, you think, okay, I've learned from that list, maybe I should go listen to those. But they're also utilities for playing songs. If you're a subscriber to a playlist, you press a button, now you can begin hearing those songs in rank or in random order. So people of a certain age will appreciate that they're both a floor wax and a dessert topic. Can you see that? Okay, the Chevy Chase skit from Saturday Night Live. The question this paper wants to be about is about the power that Spotify might have. Let me just give a little background. So there are a lot of playlists at Spotify, and anyone can create a playlist. Anyone's free to do so. There's a famous playlist called Hipster International that Sean Parker created, and if you Google it, you'll find that he broke Lorde. That is, he put Lorde on his list, and then she became big. I have no reason to doubt that. That list has a couple of 100,000 followers. It turns out, though, that the top 25 lists at Spotify, according to the number of followers, are all Spotify owned. And in fact, 24 of them are curated, not algorithmic, but curated by human lists. So Spotify is in a pretty good position to be influential if playlists have any influence. Right, so there are two versions of this question we want to go after. One is, does playlist inclusion affect song success? And then a cousin of that question is about discovery. And the distinction is going to be between lists that cover songs that are sort of by already known artists or songs that are already doing well versus lists that are enumerating literally new songs, potentially by literally new artists where discovery is a little more maybe consequential. So what do we have as data? Spotify is very nice in the sense that they release the daily top 200, the number of streams for the top 200 songs by country. So we had that for 2 years, for 26 countries. Spotify has more countries than that, but those are the countries for which we're going to have some of the country-specific playlists. We also have some playlist data. Playlist data are a little harder to get. You can get the current playlist data at Spotify, but historical playlists are harder to find. We were able to find about 7 months of playlist data for some major global curated lists, and an entire year, 2017, for the New Music Friday lists. So let me talk a little bit about those. So two broad types of lists. The global playlists, again, are the same regardless of where you are on the planet. You use that list, it's the same list of songs. The four of them that we'll look at are these curated lists. Today's top hits, Rap Caviar, Viva Latino, and Baile Reggaeton. Then there's one algorithmic list, the global top 50. And that just tells you what song was streaming in the rank of songs according to streams yesterday. That's the global top 50 today. And then the second kind is these country-specific playlists that promote the discovery of new Music Friday, US, and so forth for 26 countries. All right, so I'll talk about the results kind of by type of list. For the globally curated lists, the features of these lists are, songs are already known and already streaming and already probably showing some pretty significant signs of success before they're put on these lists, okay? But what's neat about it is we observe the streams before and after it comes on the list, so you can use a before and after approach to measuring the impact. Biggest curated lists, again, I've mentioned, they're the numbers of followers in millions at the time of the study. They've all, I think, grown since then, but we're talking about lots of followers. So the question is, what happens to the streams with the discontinuous jumps in followers when a song is added or removed? And this picture kind of tells you a lot. So the dashed line is the number of followers, and so you see it jumps when a playlist adds it, and it jumps a whole bunch when today's top hits adds it. And then it falls quite a bit when today's top hits drops it. Again, it's the number of followers because different playlists are added. The solid line is streams. The sawtooth pattern is day of the week effects. Streaming is bigger on some days than others, but you see when it gets added to today's top hits, the number of streams jumps pretty substantially, stays up, and jumps down. It almost looks mechanical. Right? That's really what, in the first part of the paper, that's what the econometrics is going to be doing, measuring that not just for one song in one country, but for all the song country instances of songs entering or leaving the big lists. This is a geeky slide that just says what I just said. We're going to just pile those pictures together for, again, all the instances in the different countries, and I think this slide maybe is a nicer one to look at. When you aggregate things together, and this is now for today's top hits, you see that this is days up to the ad and then days after the ad. So streams are rising, but then there's a jump, and then, and so forth. With a drop, streams had already been following, but then there's a jump. We're going to refer to or estimate the effect as just a jump. And just to be clear about that jump, we see a song on a list at some point. We don't know whether it was added today or yesterday. We know that 2 days ago it can't have been on. And we know that tomorrow it has to be on the whole day. So the difference between tomorrow and 2 days ago is how we measure the effect. And that's arguably conservative, but that's pretty much what's going on. All right. The only thing I guess to take away from this here, what we're doing is quantifying the jump we can add and subtract. Too many numbers maybe, but there's a clear positive effect of an add, the +3, +3, +3. I'll talk about units in a minute, and a negative effect of the drops. One thing that's interesting is the negative effect of the drops tend to be smaller than the positive effect of the adds. It's as though there's some decay in the effect during the period when it's on the playlist. And by the way, with these global lists, it's on the list for on average 40, 70, some number of days like that. Pretty long time. And so we're going to think about the effect as the average of how much it went up when it got added and how much it dropped when it fell. Think about a trapezoid. Think about middle school geometry or something. All right. Now, before I tell you about units and numbers, let me talk briefly about the global, algorithmic list, the global top 50. Again, the global top 50 is based on streams yesterday. The way we want to go after this is look at the song that just didn't make the list and see how much less it streams relative to the song that just did make the list. And so this picture does it better than anything else. What this picture shows is the percent decline in streams. So the 40 here means the 41st song versus the 40th song and so forth. Again, according to yesterday's rank. The song that just didn't make the list streams a lot less, 6% less than the last song that did. Whereas in this range from rank 40 to rank 60, there's in general like a 2% drop in streams. So this says, yes, indeed, there's an impact of making that list in global top 50. So we'll talk a little bit about numbers. So when we take our estimates and we multiply them by the number of days you're on the list and we rescale the parameters for the different country sizes, what we get is that the daily effect of being on today's top hits is 259,000 streams. Given how long songs are on there, the overall effect is about 20 million streams for today's top hits, about 10 for Rap Caviar, 50 from Viva Latino. Again, songs are on that list a lot longer, and about 27 million for Baila Reggaeton. Now, to turn this into dollars, what we do is we take what Spotify has said in the past, which I think many people will find to be high. They say $6 to $8.4 per thousand streams. And I think today people have been talking about numbers that are more like 4. So if you want to scale things down, in any event, we say for today's top hits, it's between $116,000 and $162,000. This would be the $6 number if you thought 4 was the right number, just 2/3 of that. All right? But again, these numbers for the different global curated lists are in these ranges here: 100, 70, 350, $200,000. Other thing I want to say though, is this a big number or a small number? Well, one way to think about that is the 20 million streams or 19 million streams for today's top hits. How does that compare to the total amount of streams for the songs that are on today's top hits? And on average, that's 84 million. So it's about 20%. So it's a non-trivial chunk of the success of these very successful songs is directly attributable to the playlists. All right, now, some aspect of this feels mechanical, right? Suppose, and let's talk through that. Now, if you sort of look at sources and try to figure out on average how many songs users listen to per day, the best number we can come up with is 7 songs per day. These playlists have 50 songs on them. Suppose that all of the listening that one did operated through one playlist. Well, so there are 18.5 million users of today's top hits that each heard 7 of the 50 songs per day. Then that's all the listening they would do. There would be a 2.59 million stream effect of being on that list. Instead, we see it's almost literally a tenth that. So if you want to think about this as mechanical, you can think about it as though people spend a tenth of their time listening via that list. It's a very back-of-the-envelope calculation, but I just wanted to acknowledge that some of this seems mechanical. All right, so, and if you want to think how big is that mechanical component, I said it was 10% for today's top hits. It ranges between 10 and 20 across these different global curated lists. All right, let me switch gears and talk about the new music list. Alan, how am I doing for time? Perfect, okay. So these new music lists are different in the sense that there's no pre-list streaming history. There are 2 consequences of that. One, a measurement issue. We can't use the before and after approach, so we need a different empirical approach. The other thing, though, I think is more substantive is that these are new songs, and sometimes they're actually new artists. So whatever results we find, I think, shed more light on product discovery. Okay? So with new music lists, there are 50 new songs per week by country, and they're on the list for literally 7 days. That's the whole duration of it. And it's different lists by country, although there's substantial overlap across countries, and that'll be part of how we get after this question. Let me first show you an interesting but ultimately uninformative picture. What this picture shows you is these are new music rank lists from 1 to 20. The list is 50 long. The vertical axis is the share of songs that ultimately appear in our streaming data, meaning in the top daily 200 at some day, at least at some day. And so what it says is songs ranked number 1, about 85% of them make the list. Songs ranked number 2, it's about 80, and it very steadily declines. The gray bar is the top 100 as opposed to the top 200. Now, of course, there are 2 directions of causality here. It could be that there's an impact of having a high list, but at the same time, the curators are choosing them precisely because, or very possibly, precisely because they expect them to do well. So this is not really informative for the question, what's the impact? But it is interesting. Now, we want to try to make use of the fact that the same song appears at different ranks in different countries. So here's a particular week in the US and Canada. And what you can see is there are a bunch of songs on both lists the same week, but they're at different ranks. If you think that the quality of a song is the same in the US and Canada, and we'll push back on that assumption in a minute, but if you think about it that way, then the question is, if that same song is ranked better on the new music list in the US relative to Canada, does it stream better? The answer is going to be yes. I'll show you that. Here's the US-Canada rank differential. And here is essentially the differential probability of succeeding, right? So that success measure, it's either 1 or 0. I'm on the top 200 or not. And so that for Canada minus the US is either 1 minus 1, 1 minus 0, 0 minus 1, which is why it extends from 1 to minus 1. But the negative slope of this line just says what would be better said in words, which is that when a particular song is ranked better in Canada than in the US on the new music list, it streams more highly, or it's more likely to attain streaming success. Another geeky slide. So if you take that logic and do it across all the countries now, and stick it into a regression with song fixed effects, the important assumption here, and I think it's worth attacking in a few minutes, is that if the unobserved quality of a particular song is the same in different countries, then the song fixed effect will control for that unobserved quality. Then the parameter we estimate on the new music rank is going to show the effect of being ranked at rank R relative to the omitted 50th ranked song. So let me just show you what you get when you do that. The dashed line just reproduces what I said was uninformative before. The solid line, though, is what comes out of this new approach then of just using the within song variation. So instead of there being an 80% probability, there's a 50% incremented probability for being ranked number 1 relative to being ranked number 50 in the new music rank. Now, there are a lot of reasons to worry. Even though this sort of the same song in different countries has the same quality idea, has some appeal, there are a lot of reasons to worry about it. So let me just talk through this slide. What I've done here, instead of having 50 ranks of songs, I have 3 groups of ranks, or 4 really. 1 through 5, 6 through 10, 11 through 30, and I'm going to treat 31 through 50 as though they were 0, and they look like 0 in the data. The naive approach that I said was uninformative is represented here, and here's what so far I would call the more attractive approach. So let's think about a few different things we can do. One is to include only countries that have similar preferences, with the notion that quality would be more similar across those countries. When you do that for the US, Great Britain, and Canada versus the baseline, you get basically the same answer. Colombia, Spain, Mexico, pretty similar. One of the big concerns to have is domestic music. If you think about what does song quality mean, does it mean different things in different countries, you might think that a Canadian song is more appealing to Canadians than it is to Americans. So how about we just throw out all the domestic songs? If you do that, we have this here, which is again pretty similar to the basic song fixed effects. Now if you focus on various kinds of new or indie music, so this takes out artists this includes only the artists who are on indie labels and who had no streams in 2016, so they seem new. Here are the ones where we more carefully look and see, find no history of them pre-existing. Here are the ones who are new and we take out the domestic and so forth. So here are the new, we take out indies. The point of this slide is to try to say, look, a lot of things you can try, you get about the same looking answer. So it looks like there's some robustness to this. Still, there's something to worry about. You still could worry that rank differentials across countries reflect the curator's beliefs about different preferences. And so, to get around this, it's a little bit geeky, but I want the economists at least to appreciate this. You want an instrumental variable that changes the ranks in different countries for reasons unrelated to the preferences for the music. And the idea we have is this: home bias. In the US, so every country has home bias both in the musics and the lists, in the music and listening and in the lists. A country with a bigger domestic sector is going to have more songs pushing non-domestic songs farther down the list. So that notion would be we can use the size of the domestic market as a source of variation in the ranks of songs, and that way we can get differences in the ranks that are not about the curator's beliefs about preferences, but rather just about something to do with the way the ranks get established. So the idea is a particular song from a big country like France will be lower ranked in Germany than in the Netherlands, again, because there's more domestic music in France to push it farther down the list. So if you implement that approach, what you find is that the instrument works in the sense that the total, so our measure of the size of the market is positively related to the rank, which means it's worse, so our instrument works. The second thing to say is that, as before, we have this is like the analog of the song fixed effects approach here. It's about half as big as just the naive approach. But then the punchline here is the instrumented approach. It's about the same in size as our baseline song fixed effect approach. So from this, we conclude that the song fixed effect estimate of the new music effect is robust, or appears to be robust. Okay, a little bit about persistence. Songs are on the new music lists for 7 days. This is 0 to 100 days. Songs ranked at the top 5 on the new music, 6 to 10, 11 to 30. What's interesting is this is not purely mechanical, because after it's off the list, it still has elevated streaming. So it's not purely mechanical, sort of in the way that you might think the global lists are more purely mechanical. How about the size of the effect? So this is a slide that's going to actually make use of the streaming data. A little bit of sleight of hand there, because we only observe streaming if you're in the top 200, which means we treat it as 0 when you're not, which is not quite right. That said, what this slide is doing is asking, what's the aggregate all the time together, and what's the effect of being number 1 relative to number 50? And what you see is a couple things. First of all, the new music effect is very concentrated in the top 10. Not much of anything going on outside the top 10. And being ranked number 1 in the US would raise streams by about 14 million, worth about $100,000 with the calculations we used before. Who benefits from playlist inclusion? It's US artists and major labels that are big on the global curated lists. It's non-US artists, and to a much bigger extent, indie labels on the new music lists. This is, having said that, bias by label status or national origin is quite interesting. We don't really have much to say about bias yet. It's a tough thing to demonstrate. But having said that, I thought yesterday's discussion of gender was so interesting. I'm going to redo this by gender and maybe have something more to talk about in a month. All right, so let me just conclude. Playlists have a substantial causal impact on streaming. On the promotion side, it delivers a substantial share of listening to these already famous, or already well-known songs. The effect is big. It's on the order of a quarter. For example, today's top hits is being delivered by today's top hits, and it's about $150,000 in that playlist. On the discovery side, these playlist inclusion decisions raise the probability that new songs succeed, including those by new artists. It's robust to a variety of approaches, and being number one on new music list in the U.S. is worth about $100,000. One last thing to say. So, the recorded music industry used to worry a lot about Walmart and its share of the retail market. It was 22% or something, and it's like, oh my goodness. I mean, Spotify has a pretty big share of the retail market. It's growing. It is the dominant, that's a badly punctuated sentence, but it's the dominant manager of its own playlists. So they're in a position to, I think, influence things a lot. Now, the major labels also are said to own a big chunk of Spotify, and they're the big beneficiaries of the global curated playlist decisions. We don't see any evidence in the paper of bias, but we do think that data openness and monitoring would be a good idea, given the power, the growing power of this type of intermediary market. Okay, I'm done. There it is.
All right, we have time for questions, so questions for John.
Bill, I have two questions. As I understand it, the discontinuity from getting onto the list looks like it's responsible for 6% bump in.
Or 6 minus 4, 4%, yeah.
Yet you found 20% in your next calculation. Is that because being in the middle of the list is a lot better than the
Yeah, it's a great question. We have no power against it. We have no way to answer the inframarginal effect of being on the list for the global list. So it could be that it would seem to be therefore that it's bigger for inframarginal, to be 40th or whatever than it is for just being on the cusp.
Which sort of suggests that people will listen to the list in order. And if you're 50, it's not as good just because.
Well, I absolutely would have thought so. But when we did so today's top hits as well as the others are also rank ordered, and yet we don't find systematically different effects at rank for those lists. But it very much could be for this. It's very astute.
My other question is in terms of discovery. Did you look at spillovers to other songs by the same artist?
We thought about that. We thought about Hendrix and Sorensen. The problem is we only observed the top 200. And so typically, anything else, there may be some exceptions, but usually the other stuff not in the top.
You need to get the data from Nielsen.
Yes, from Nielsen or for the rest of the countries from Spotify. But yeah, we thought about that. I think we did. Yes.
You mentioned persistence, and it made me wonder, because not just the mechanical effect, but could the inclusion on those lists put you on other lists after?
I think the answer is absolutely yes. There's a whole ecosystem of lists, and I don't think that the number of followers is equivalent to the influence. I mean, Hipster International, I don't disbelieve the story that Hipster International created Lord, but understanding the propagation mechanism from Sean, putting it on that list and then other people. So in fact, I think that is what's going on. We don't have all the playlists. I wish we did. It would be really interesting to watch the propagation from some influential lists to other lists. And even the picture I did show you of today's top hits, there were a bunch of smallish, discontinuous jumps well before it got on. The journalistic accounts all indicate that at Spotify, they're testing things all the time. They're trying things on little lists and see how it does, and then they put it on the big list. So there's a lot of intentional propagation.
Did you look at the DSPs? What's going on? If a song currently has on YouTube, we know that looked at other data that suggests the time at which a song takes to reach 1 billion streams on YouTube is shrinking dramatically. We can be much quicker.
We would so much like to do this. So we don't have data on any other services, and they're pretty hard to get. One thing we did do is we were curious about effects outside the system. So we did get some data, we downloaded some data on old-fashioned iTunes sales. Wondering, because there you can get the ranks, the daily ranks at iTunes. Wondering whether today's top hits ad changed the sales rank at iTunes, and it didn't. So these effects seem to be inside the system. We don't have a really good data about that, but I completely agree. There are a lot of reasons we would love to have the data for Apple, and we don't. This one, yeah, we got it.
I know somebody is self-qualified, you know, they might want to, but my two questions are econometrics. I don't know if you have enough data over time to control for trend, or maybe I missed something. And then the other, my MBA question is, I think Spotify is a $1 billion company. If I'm right, then the numbers are fairly small, I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, I think that big or small is big or small, I think, relative to the income of or the earnings of a particular artist or the rights holder. I mean, I'm saying we're accounting for 20% of the success of the songs that make it on those lists. So that seems, I don't know, that's arguably big. The trend issue, we're trading off the discontinuity. Indeed, there is a trend, but we're just trading off of the jump between 2 days before and 1 day after. And so that's all we're, even if, you know, we can run estimates where we stick a trend in there, but there's still a jump. There's still a jump.
Okay.
Yes, please.
You said the country-specific music lists are 26 countries?
Well, we have them for 26. I think they have them for
For
more.
every single country that's authorized?
I think so.
And then are the 26 like the most relevant for the research, or just ones we were able to get?
So they're the ones we're able to get. It turns out that they're probably, if you were to name 26 countries, we'd probably have them. But I mean, I wish we had more.
So maybe like the biggest markets too?
They're pretty much the biggest. I mean, so we have Indonesia and Singapore and Malaysia, but yeah, we have the ones we could get. There are these two data sources that track playlists. One's called SpotOnTrack.com, one's called Chartmetric. And SpotOnTrack was just easier for us to get the data from. But I don't think either of them has. They're both missing data from before May of 2017. So I think two different folks got the same idea and started service around the same time.
All right, I think we better cut it off there. Thank you very much, Joel. And our next presenter is Jeremy Watson.
Thanks, first of all, to the Herman organizers for inviting me out here. It's been a very fun conference so far. Before I begin, I also like to thank the NDR Program of Digitization for funding this research. Without their support, this paper would not be possible. So in this paper, we asked the question of, how does copyright protection and public domain status affect consumers' access to creative works, especially music? And in particular, how do these effects differ by medium in terms of pre-recorded music, both in physical format and digital streaming, as well as live performances. Kind of the trade-off facing policymakers here is that on the one hand, longer copyright terms may create incentives for rights holders obviously to promote music, but also for them to maintain these rights, making it available in new technology formats as we move from vinyl to CD, digital streaming, and so on. But on the other hand, they must balance this with the effect of copyright protection. Copyright protection may restrict entry by producers who could enter the market and distribute near perfect substitutes without paying a license. So specifically, we look at how the expiration of recording copyrights in the United Kingdom affects access to music by primarily rock and roll musicians that were popular in the 1960s. We'll give you a little background. Recording copyright was a term of 50 years. Until 2013, at which point it was extended to 70 years. The composition and lyrics were protected separately and were not affected by this policy change. One of the very interesting things about our context is that many artists in the 1960s are still living at that time and were actively touring and promoting their work. So this allows us to basically look at two aspects of the supply of music. One, we can look at pre-recorded music and its availability, but we can also look at the live performances of these songs, and once this copyright term is extended, how that affects rights holders' behavior. And just very pragmatically, this term extension allows us to econometrically identify the effect of public domain status while controlling for time, age, and artist effects.
To give you a preview of the results, overall we find very mixed results. For pre-recorded physical formats, we find that the expiration of a copyright is associated with about 150 to 250% increase in the amount of versions available of that song. But we don't find any significant difference in online streaming on Spotify for works that are in the public domain as compared to under copyright protection. And quite provocatively, we find that it appears that artists are less likely to perform songs in concert for recordings that have fallen into the public domain. And I'll get into that later. Prior research in this area, there's some nice work by Paul Heald and Andrew Reimers that I really suggest you go read, suggesting that when books fall into the public domain, they're available in many more editions from many more publishers as these publishers enter the market. Of course, as these publishers enter the market, they compete, and these books that have fallen into the public domain are available at generally lower prices. Our contribution here, obviously one is we're looking at music, not books, but also our ability to observe artists who are still living during the period of this right-term extension allows us to really examine their behavior. Additionally, this work kind of contributes to the growing literature on creative reuse and copyright material. Abhishek Nagaraj has this nice paper on copyright effects on Wikipedia contributions, as well as kind of my own dissertation work on copyright sampling in hip-hop music. The term extension that we use as an experiment in this paper has eventually been known as Cliff's Law, named after Cliff Richard and Shadows, who I had never heard of until writing this paper, but is apparently very popular in the United Kingdom. And this, unlike many past copyright term extensions, this one was really lobbied for by musicians, motivated by this kind of income gap that they're seeing in the later stages of their lives and careers. So copyright for the sound recordings was established with the Copyright Act of 1911, limited to 50 years from the date of recording. This Directive 2011-77, as it's formally known, extended the copyright of that sound recording to 70 years. It was not retroactive, so songs that had already passed into the public domain were not granted any additional rights. And it included this kind of use it or lose it clause where for works that were not actively being marketed by the label, there was a chance that these works could be, the rights could be clawed back by the original creator. So in this paper, we focus on kind of three aspects of the supply of music. Physical releases, these are releases of albums, re-releases of these albums in remastered versions and so on, compilations, box sets, and so on, across all the kind of different physical formats that have been introduced over the years. As well, we look at digital streaming on Spotify platform, and this is capable because, as was mentioned, the digital streaming is often restricted by geographic country region. Additionally, we look at live performances in concert. We observe, artist location, concert locations, dates, and songs performed. So to construct this data set, I don't want to get too much into this because it'll give you, nightmares from grad school. But the data set was constructed basically